Luka Magnotta, a Canadian porn actor suspected of murdering and dismembering a Chinese student and delivering his body parts to Canada's top political parties, was arrested on Monday at a Berlin cafe while reading about himself on the internet. The suitcase was leaking an awful smell. It had been there for days, and the janitor had spotted it every time he swept out in the alleyway behind the apartment complex. Until then, he'd managed to ignore it out, but the stench inside began to get stronger and stronger. He could not have imagined what he discovered inside, but it smelled like a sickening pig roast left outside to rot. A man's disfigured torso, his limbs amputated. The deceased man's remaining body parts would ultimately surface in the late spring of 2012, but they would not be discovered anywhere in the vicinity of that Montreal apartment. Instead, his left foot would turn up in a package wrapped by Canada Post and delivered to the Prime Minister of Canada's offices. Just in time, the package headed to the Liberal Party that was containing his left hand would be intercepted. No one, however, could prevent the right half of his body from reaching its intended destination. In Vancouver, British Columbia, 2 primary schools attended by a large number of students would unwrap packages containing severed and decomposing human remains at the start of the school day. It didn't take long to figure out who did it. After all, Luka Magnotta had videotaped his own murder. He posted an 11-minute video of himself tearing apart Jun Lin on the website bestgore.com so that everyone could watch it. Hence, the question of why rather than who had done it was more intriguing than how. In 1982, Eric Newman gave birth to Luka Magnotta in Ontario. He chose the new name for himself, a type of self-reinvention intended to get rid of unwanted memories. One of Magnotta's few acquaintances, Nina Arsenault, said that he had some disturbing childhood experiences. She added that Magnotta was so troubled by these memories that he would have incidents of hitting himself in the face. It's difficult to figure out which memory was causing him such excruciating pain. Maybe it was because, when he was 10 years old, his parents deserted him and took him in to live with his cruel and controlling grandmother. Perhaps there was something from his adolescence, when he was young and bisexual in a small Ontario town, that made it difficult, or perhaps it was just insanity. All things considered, Magnotta had begun experiencing voices at the age of 18, having inherited paranoid schizophrenia from his father. Whatever it was that had left him agitated, Luka Magnotta did everything in his power to wipe out Eric Newman. He'd had plastic surgery to rebuild his entire face and plunged himself into a new life as a male escort and minor porn star. Even his family was concerned. As his aunt subsequently stated, he was a ticking time bomb. All Jun Lin wanted was a friend. He was a 33-year-old Chinese international student who had only recently moved to Montreal. By spring of 2012, he was content to have a friend when he got in touch with the now 29-year-old Luka Magnotta. Later on, one of Lin's friends remarked, he wanted to find someone with something in common. He didn't deserve this. Magnotta said that the two met on the night of May 24th, after Lin answered to a Craigslist ad that the former posted in the hopes of meeting someone interested in sex and bondage. Around 9 o'clock that evening, Jun Lin texted a friend one last time. The next time anyone saw him was in a video on bestgore.com with the title, "One Lunatic, One Ice Pick," the following day. According to the video, Jun Lin was stripped naked and bound to a bed frame, while New Order's music thundered from the speakers. Magnotta used a kitchen knife and an ice pick to dismember him. He then recorded himself sexually abusing and cutting up the body, letting a dog to chew on it, and even eating bits of it himself. Police believe that cannibalism is visible in an extended version of the footage they reviewed. Luka Magnotta had been under investigation for more than a year for heinous acts of violence before killing Jun Lin. Due to the fact that Magnotta had posted a video of himself slaughtering animals, a group of online sleuths had been working to track him down. Luka Magnotta published another film, One Boy, One Kittens, a year and a half before killing Lin, in which he strangled 2 tabby kittens to death with a vacuum and a plastic bag. Since then, the online sleuths have gathered a huge amount of evidence to bring Magnotta down. In an attempt to apprehend Magnotta before he killed a person, they had pulled from his photos of animals being tortured, discovered information about his hiding place, and then alerted the authorities of all of this. Finding Magnotta hadn't been hard for them to do. He had made every effort to boost his online presence. He created Wikipedia articles about himself twice, made his own fake fan pages, and circulated rumors that he was dating serial killer Karla Homolka. The sleuths looking for Magnotta speculated he'd also slaughtered cats for the publicity. There is an unwritten internet rule. One of the sleuths told Rolling Stone that there is a Rule 0 that states that you shouldn't mess with cats. What better way to become famous than to EFF with cats? Another added. However, there wasn't much of a response from the police when sleuths contacted them. When one of the vigilantes was called, they dismissed me, saying, "It's just cats." What more could I have done? Ultimately, I warned them that this man will kill someone. Of course, Luka Magnotta did turn around and murder someone. When the footage of Jun Lin's death was proved to be genuine, authorities began looking for the perpetrator. After Magnotta's apartment building's janitor discovered the victim's torso with papers of identification close by. When police reviewed the video footage from the building, they discovered that the murderer and his victim had entered the building shortly before the murder. When police finally arrived at Magnotta's apartment in the building, they discovered blood all over the place, including on the refrigerator, mattress, and bathtub. Although he wasn't there, they had found their murderer and matched the torso remains with those that had been delivered across Canada. The police were also completely aware of what had happened to their victim. By that time, Magnotta had fled to Paris under his own identity, making it easy for authorities to track him down. After that, he caught a bus to Berlin, but the police were following him and would eventually apprehend him. On June 4th, they located him in an internet cafe in Berlin. When police arrived, Magnotta was Googling his own name. Oblivious to his own fame, I had no choice but to do it. As he waited for his trial to start, Luka Magnotta told a psychiatrist, "It just gave me this weird energy. Something happened in my head." Magnotta claimed that he and Lin were lovers spending the night together, when a black automobile outside filmed them and convinced him that Jun Lin was an agent. "Tie him up. Cut it." He heard a voice tell him. He said, "Do it. He works for the government." After cutting Lin's throat and dismembering his body, Magnotta said that a voice commanded him to submit the body to the government, so he dispatched the body parts to government offices. Of course, it's difficult to determine whether Magnotta is speaking the truth. As per the statement of another psychiatrist, Magnotta's disorganized cognitive process was not evidenced by the details and coordination of the acts. Alternatively, other researchers asserted that Magnotta deliberately committed the crime in order to gain attention, that is, for himself. The issue was that any attention, even notorious ones, is preferable than none at all. It's possible that we will never fully understand what went wrong in Luka Magnotta's mind. Nevertheless, his jury rejected his claim of insanity. They judged him guilty on all counts in December 2014 and gave him a life sentence. However, Luka Magnotta's sentence will undoubtedly never be sufficient for Jun Lin's family. The victim's father said, "I will never see his smiling face, hear about his new accomplishments, or hear him laugh." December 30th is Jun Lin's birthday, and he will never be present on any of our birthdays. When Shanann Watts met Chris in 2010, she was dealing with health issues. Chris sent me a friend request on Facebook while I was in a really awful condition. 4 months before she passed away, she stated in an internet video, I was like, what the heck, I'm never going to meet him. Well, one thing led to another, and 8 years later, we have 2 kids. He's the best thing that has ever happened to me. And we live in Colorado. The couple then began a family after relocating to Colorado. Bella was born in December of 2013. A first-time mother of a girl, Shannon was overwhelmed. In her obituary, her family expressed how much they valued and adored her. July 2015, less than 2 years later, saw Celeste's birth. Shanann's relatives said, "Oh, how excited she was to be able to have another child because of her battle with lupus." Being able to spend time with her was always a blessing. Shanann found herself pregnant again in 2018, and she intended to name her baby boy Nico. The couple's marriage seemed solid from the outside. Shannon, nevertheless, observed a major change during the summer of 2018. "He's changed. I'm not sure who he is anymore." On August 7th, she sent a friend a text message that said, "He hasn't touched me, kissed me, or talked to me, except when I'm trying to figure out what's wrong. This kind of issue has never happened in our relationship before. All I want to do is cry out." August 13th, 2018 was the last time Shanann and the girls were seen. Following their disappearance, Chris Watts begged for their safe return in a series of rambling television interviews. A day after his family was reported missing, he told Denver 7, "We had an emotional conversation. She wasn't here, the kids weren't here, nobody was here." Chris had worked for Anadarko Petroleum Corp., an oil and gas company, when Shanann's body was discovered on August 16th. Later that day, Bella and Celeste, Shanann's daughters, had been discovered in oil tanks next to her body. Chris had suffocated the girls and strangled Shanann with his bare hands. On 3 charges of first-degree murder and 3 counts of tampering with a body, Chris was placed under arrest. Chris claimed to have told Shanann he wanted to separate when he was detained by the police. He asserted that he rushed downstairs and witnessed Shanann strangling Celeste with Bella's lifeless body lying nearby. He claimed that he rushed upstairs in a fit of rage and strangled Shanann. Police didn't think his version of events was credible. At the time, police said, "His story didn't match the evidence that we had." "We believe Chris was responsible for their deaths." The authorities quickly discovered that Chris was having an affair with Nicole Kessinger, an employee of his company. Following the discovery of the killings, Kessinger complied with the police. Kessinger seemed to be concerned about probable public humiliation before stepping up. She wrote the name of the woman who was having an affair with notorious killer Scott Peterson, who killed his wife Lacey and their unborn child in 2002, into an internet search and asked, "Did people hate Amber Frey?" Kessinger told authorities that she assumed Watts was going through an amicable divorce. At Pinehurst, North Carolina's Sacred Heart Catholic Church, hundreds of mourners gathered to offer condolences to Shanann, her girls, and her unborn son, Nico. Frankie Razuchek, Shanann's brother, stated at the funeral, "I always worried about her and the girls being so far because I couldn't protect them." Although Chris Watts was not mentioned in Razuchek's funeral, he had previously attacked him, labeling him a vicious sociopath, and claiming that he stole my whole world. On November 6, 2018, Watts took a shocking turn of events when he confessed to killing his pregnant wife and their small children in exchange for avoiding the possibility of death penalty. The evidence was overwhelming in his detriment. Considering the evidence, he had no alternative, though it took some time for him to come around. But he eventually did. However, not everyone found the plea deal to be satisfactory. In multiple interviews, Cindy Watts, Watts's mother, expressed her disbelief that the confession and the plea were forced. Watts was given a life sentence without the possibility of release on November 19, 2018. The prosecutor stated that the defendant took the life of Shanann, her 2 daughters, and her unborn son, coldly and deliberately. Frank Zuchek, Shanann's father, frequently referred to Watts as a monster and an awful human being during the victim impact statements. Sandra Ruchek, Shanann's mother, stated, "I don't know who gave you the right to take their lives, but I know God and His powerful angels were there in that moment to bring them home to paradise." A video of Chris Watts' whole confession, which he had given to detectives in February, was released to the public on March 7, 2019. He testified to jumping on Shanann in bed the night of the killings, as seen in the footage, to agents from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. He claimed that she threatened to leave him and take the kids with her. when he told that he no longer loved her anymore. Next, with Shanann's lifeless body in the truck's back and his daughters still alive in the back seat, Watts drove for 45 minutes to a distant oil field. Watts claimed to have smothered Celeste in the back seat before burying Shanann in a shallow grave. He returned to smother Bella, who was pleading for her life, after disposing of Celeste's body in an abandoned field. Bella shouted, "Daddy, no!" And those were her last words before he killed her. Sources claim that Watts's life in prison is everything but exciting. He leaves his cell for exercise and shower for an hour a day. He is still confined in the prison's evaluation unit. He is permitted to have a Bible in his cell, but not much more. A friend of Watts claims that because he has so much free time, he has thought a lot about his past, that everyone is in pain, saddens him. He yearns to travel back in time. He regrets the way he handled the situation. In a terrifying letter sent from a jail cell to his mother in July 2019, Chris Watts established that he had changed and had developed a new relationship with God. Killer Dad, Chris Watts speaks, on HLN featured an interview with his mother, Cindy Watts. She read the letter she got from her son, "I'm still a dad," during the show. "I'm still a son, no matter what," Watts wrote. "Now I can add servant of God to that mix. He has shown me peace, love, and forgiveness, and that's how I live every day." The last texts Shanann sent her husband were made public in a 2020 Netflix documentary titled American Murder: The Family Next Door. She wrote, "Thank God. Prayers for a safe flight. Love you." In her final text to Chris, as the plane prepared to take off, Chris did not reply. FBI agents, who also provided a list of standard warning signs to recognize domestic violence, stated that Watts had no prior criminal record and no history of domestic violence at the time of the deaths. Domestic violence affects a great number of families and, as Lee pointed out, this particular case demonstrates that it may happen anywhere. The consequences can occasionally be fatal. On the evening of February 21, 2001, Ashton Kutcher got ready for a date. He was going out with a 22-year-old girl named Ashley Ellerin that night. However, when he showed up at her Los Angeles home to pick her up, she did not answer the door. As Kutcher looked through the window to see whether she was inside, he noticed what seemed to be a red wine stain on the carpet. This didn't surprise him, since a few days before he had been to a wild party there. After a few minutes, Ellerin did not show up, leading the young actor to believe he had been stood up. However, Ashton Kutcher later discovered that the stain on Ellerin's floor was not of red wine, but blood. The following morning, Ellerin's roommate returned home and found her dead body lying there. She had suffered 47 stab wounds. Subsequently, Michael Gargiulo, popularly referred to as the Hollywood Ripper and the Boy Next Door Killer, was later recognized by investigators as her killer. But Gargiulo was not held accountable for his atrocious crimes until 2019, nearly 2 decades after he brutally murdered Ashley Ellerin. Ashley Ellerin was born on the 16th of July, 1978. Her family relocated from California to New Jersey, where she was raised, but it didn't make her any less confident considering she was the new girl at her school. Carolyn Mernick, a childhood friend and author of the book The Hot One, a memoir of friendship, sex, and murder, about Ellerin's death, says that Ellerin had a look of someone who knew how to have a good time. Ashley immediately piqued my interest for a myriad of inexplicable reasons that, in retrospect, I can only sum up as timing and chemistry. She wrote, "What else was there, really? She had a round face and shiny dark hair. Furthermore, she didn't try to rush her attempts to become friends with the popular girls, or overplay the interest that came with her, being a new 4th-grade student at the school. While Ellerin and Mernick were childhood friends, they progressively lost touch during their sophomore year of high school when the Ellen family moved back to California. Even though they didn't communicate for a while, Mernick and Ellerin got back in touch in the year 2000. Ellerin worked at a local strip club and was an aspiring fashion designer, yet she revealed to Murnick that occasionally there had been arrangements also taking place in hotels. Murnick had also heard rumors that Ellerin had been taking various drugs and going out to parties frequently. As for Ellerin's vocabulary, that of youth, risk, and sexual possibility, Murnick described it as if they were speaking in two different languages. Around the same period, Ashley Ellerin began dating Ashton Kutcher. Subsequently, Kutcher stated in court that he met Ellerin at a friend's birthday party. Since he was already dating someone at the time, he introduced Ellerin to one of his friends. However, neither relationship panned out, and Kutcher and Ellerin eventually made plans to attend a post-Grammys party together. The event was supposed to be on February 21, 2001, the night of Ashley Ellerin's demise. At 8:24 p.m. that fateful night, Ashton Kutcher had his last conversation with Ellerin. He told her that he would be late, but she assured him that there won't be any problem because she still needed to dry her hair. Around 10 p.m., Kutcher tried to call Ellerin again to let her know he was on his way, but he was unable to contact her. He dialed her a number of times, but she never picked up. When he arrived at her Hollywood house at 10:45 p.m., the front door was locked. There was no response when I knocked on the door, knocked again, and once again, but no answer. Kutcher later said in court, "At this point, I pretty much assumed she'd gone back for the night, that I was late, and she was upset." At that moment, he glanced in through the window and noticed what he initially believed to be a stain from red wine on the carpet. He said, "I didn't really think anything of it." Then Kutcher departed. When Jennifer DeSisto, Ellerin's roommate, got home the following morning, she discovered her body lying next to the bathroom door. She walked closer, assuming Ellerin was pulling a practical joke of some sort, only to discover that Ellerin had been soaked in so much blood that it had matted her hair and reddened the carpet. DeSisto phoned the police right after, and they soon ascertained that her death was the result of a homicide. But the question still stood: who was the murderer? Finding Ashley Ellen's killer took years for the law enforcement. Following a violent attack on his neighbor Michelle Murphy in 2008, Michael Gargiulo was placed under custody. Later on, investigators linked him to Ellerin's and two other women's deaths. Gargiulo was given many monikers by the press, such as the Hollywood Ripper and the Chiller Killer. The Boy Next Door Killer, on the other hand, was the most well-known since he stalked and attacked his victims in their houses and resided close to them. Actually, Ashley Ellerin and Gargiulo had first crossed paths when he saw Ashley attempting to mend a flat tire in front of her home. After offering to assist her in changing it, he kept visiting her flat to repair other things. He stopped by so often that Ellerin's roommate thought he was following her. Nevertheless, Ellerin was the type of woman who wished to see the goodness in others. She was a great girl who would make friends with anyone, according to her acquaintances. Working on Ellen's case, Detective Tom Small reported that probably someone came to the door, and the rest is history. She knew the guy, and from what those who knew her said, if you knew her, you could get in. It's possible that Gargiulo took action after discovering Ellerin by herself on February 21st. Maybe he tried to make a move and got turned down, or maybe he just wanted to kill. Regardless of his motive, Ellerin was stabbed 47 times by Gargiulo, and the wounds were so bad that they practically decapitated her. Nevertheless, for a while at least, Gargiulo had gotten away with the murder. Prior to killing Ellerin in 2001, Michael Gargiulo most likely committed his first murder in 1993. After 4 years, he carried out another attack, stabbing his neighbor Maria Bruno to death with a knife at her El Monte home. Investigators discovered that her implants had been removed and her breasts were cut off when her body was found. Gargiulo then attacked Murphy at her Santa Monica residence in 2008. After she managed to repel him, he fled, leaving a trail of blood in his wake. In August 2019, after years of postponed trials, Michael Gargiulo was found guilty of Ashley Ellerin's murder and given the death penalty. principally because of Ashton Kutcher's testimony. The Internet is renowned as a breeding ground for illegal affairs between people who typically hide behind fake aliases and handles. However, most online relationships aren't as dangerous as this one, that started when a tall, attractive blonde and a Marine sniper started dating, that ended with murder. Thomas Montgomery, a 46-year-old married father of two, was a Marine sniper. While posing as a young, attractive, Iraq-bound Marine in May 2005, he entered a teen chat room on the popular game site, Pogo, and when an 18-year-old tall, attractive blonde started instant chatting him, he started pretending to be of 18 as well. She introduced herself as an attractive 18-year-old who was ready to meet men, even if they were located far from her home in West Virginia. I kept thinking, well, we're never going to meet. I'll just play the game with her, he said. The flirtation soon turned into a romance. In reality, Thomas Montgomery, who had spent the last 12 years working at a factory in this Buffalo suburb, and his online girlfriend from West Virginia were both in their 40s. According to the police, she had taken her daughter's identity, including the younger woman's email address and web page, as her online identity. Nevertheless, if the pair's middle-legged fantasies had not collided with the real world, nobody would have been harmed. Instead, a 22-year-old co-worker of Mr. Montgomery's was shot dead on a September night as he left the power tool plant where they both were employed. In November, Mr. Montgomery was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. According to John DeFrank, Erie County's first deputy district attorney, the uniqueness of this case is that everyone appeared to be misleading everybody else, and the entire situation, which concluded in a violent death, was unnecessary. The victim, ironically, was the only one who was telling the truth here. Following the killing of Brian Barrett, a part-time manufacturing worker and aspiring teacher at neighboring Buffalo State College in the remote hamlet of Lockport, where he used to live with his parents, shook the whole town. Tom Sarkovitz, the sports director and baseball coach of Mr. Barrett at Pendleton's Starpoint High School, said, "He was a kind of an easygoing, quiet kid. Outside Lockport, he'd do anything you asked him to. He never complained about drills or running." According to the authorities, the men's co-workers at the tool business Dynabrade reported that Mr. Montgomery often bragged about his online relationship with the alleged teen since it began in May 2005. Subsequently, throughout the spring season, Mr. Barrett became involved in correspondence with the woman as well. Neither of the two men concealed about what was going on. According to Dennis Rankin, chief of the Patrol Services Division at the Erie County Sheriff's Department, the two had a long-standing feud over what they believed to be the same woman, as reported by fellow staff members. According to Mr. DeFrank, Mr. Barrett's involvement was the consequence of a dose of reality check. First of all, his wife discovered an email correspondence from the woman, whose identity the police have withheld, in which he confessed that he was not the recent Iraq veteran he had claimed to be. Furthermore, Mr. DeFrank added, Mr. Montgomery had informed the woman that she may get in touch with a friend of his named Brian. He continued, "This woman went online, looked up the person, and began chatting with him." In contrast to the other 2 points in the triangle, Mr. Barrett felt no need to fabricate a false identity. Barrett, who referred to himself as a beefcake in public forums, flirted with her online for Montgomery to see. She was perceived by both men as the stunning young woman in her sent-to-them keepsakes and profile photos. The two got into a violent conflict. At one point, Montgomery wrote to Jesse, "Brian will pay in blood." His messages to Jesse grew increasingly erratic. Barrett and Sheeler exposed Montgomery on the internet, disguising him as a pedophile by revealing his true age and photo on forums. Barrett ultimately chose to see Jesse, in spite of Sheeler's advice not to. Late on September 15th, Mr. Barrett was sitting in his car following his work shift when he was shot, in what Chief Rankin described as a sniper shooting, with a weapon of .30 caliber. When the police arrived at the scene of the crime, they instantly discovered the internet love triangle, and when they couldn't find Montgomery, they hurried to Jesse. Investigators inspected the computers of Mr. Montgomery, Mr. Barrett, and the woman in West Virginia after discovering the connection between the three, and they gathered hundreds of pages in correspondence. Mr. DeFrank stated that there were threats Montgomery made to both Barrett and the woman, apart from most of the adult-oriented data found. Nevertheless, when the police showed up at her house, 45-year-old Mary Sheeler was there to explain to them what had transpired and how seriously they wanted to speak to Jesse. A flood of tears burst Sheeler's eyes as she confessed to her intricate scheme to deceive Barrett and Montgomery. When they interrogated her, they learned that the 18-year-old Jessie was, in fact, her daughter, and that the photos in underwear she had been sending were of hers. Later, it was revealed that Sheeler had flirted with other men online as Jessie, and had even filmed a video of herself pointing a camera up her unknowing daughter's skirt. She texted it to Mullet Pill men asking, "Guys, do you like it?" At his arraignment before State Supreme Court Justice Amy Fricano, Mr. Montgomery, a stocky guy with a bushy mustache and a swirl of dark blonde hair, pleaded not guilty. Justice Fricano ordered for him to be kept without bail pending a hearing, and forbade him from getting in contact with the woman. Investigators are stumped as to why someone would kill for an affiliation that merely existed in cyberspace. As to neither man's intentions to see the woman were mentioned in the hundreds of messages that were sent. The West Virginian woman, whose actual age was unknown to Mr. Montgomery prior to his arrest, hasn't been prosecuted. "She was doing absolutely nothing wrong," Chief Rankin claimed. He continued, "It's evident that she was unaware of what was about to transpire, or that there would be a love triangle would." Mr. Barrett was, by all accounts, a good, upright young guy who was funding his college education. He was an entirely innocent individual. He was just using the internet to find a friend, and he ended up dying for it. Montgomery seemed to be drifting away from reality. On January 2, 2006, he wrote a note to himself stating that he was going to die at the age of 46 and be replaced by an 18-year-old Marine scarred with battle wounds. To be with the love of his life, he plans on moving to West Virginia. Jessie, on the other hand, was unaware of her mother's online activities. Montgomery was given a 20-year term after entering a guilty plea to Barrett's murder. New York prosecutors looked far and wide for grounds to prosecute Mary Sheeler, but eventually were unable to uncover any violation that she could be charged with. She defended herself by saying that she was keeping Montgomery online to prevent him from interacting with other teenagers. Sheeler's husband divorced her, and Jessie severed all ties. Sheeler has never expressed regret to her daughter. Barrett's parents began a legislative petition to protect people from another Mary Sheelers. If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated about the latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of unsolved cases.